Hello. Welcome to another episode of the 4Q podcast. Always asking those 4 questions of reflecting, redefining, redesigning, and realigning, because that's our formula to getting to the root of everything, right? So this episode, I've got Kris from Inside Out Kris, the podcast. She's a mum, she's a podcast host, like a business owner, just an amazing all-round person. And I think there's so many gems in this episode that I'd love for you to hear about her experience of her family and, having a strained relationship with her dad and the narratives around a divorced family, the narratives around having daddy issues. Like that was such a thing people used to say. And feeling like there's all these family expectations around having relationships with our parents and all of that. And I just think that's so relatable. I often hear that come up so much. So I really want to share that with you and share this experience. Kris was so open and so honest and so beautiful about it. So I really hope you love this one. I can't wait for you to hear it. So no more from me. Let's just jump in. And finally as well, if you're still loving this episode and loving this content and you want to go deep on this 4R formula together, please know that we've got our retreats coming up. We have our online course and we do have some one-on-one spots available now. So please know that you can work with us in any which way. So let's jump into the 4Q podcast. Hey, I'm Sheena Shuey. I'm a registered social worker and host of the 4Q podcast. I'm passionate about normalizing, not pathologizing life, and that's not easy. So each episode, I have amazing guests on to share the messy, beautiful ups and downs of life in 4 key questions with tips and tricks along the way. There are moments in life where you can embrace your story and understand that it's okay not to feel okay sometimes. So let's get into it. This is the 4Q podcast. Hey Kris, how are you? Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I am absolutely rapt to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to join a fellow podcaster in this, podcasting journey with me. And you've had some amazing guests and I really love your message and all of that. So I'm really happy to have you on. And for those of you who tune into the podcast, you know that we usually record these and we do it in the morning, but mum life for Kris and I, both in the evenings. Got to make it work, that business hustle sometimes. It's like we set these clear boundaries, but every now and again we just have to tweak it just a little bit. So we're doing this tonight. And I personally am curious if we're going to bring a different energy in the evening compared to caffeinated in the morning. So Kris, I guess before we go any further, let's start with the first R of our 4R formula, which is reflect. So tell us who you are and what are your titles, your mum life, tell us all about who Kris is.
Okay, so obviously I am Kris. I have my own podcast, which is Inside Out with Kris. I started that over 12 months ago, just before my beautiful little girl came into the world, Lola, who is almost one next Thursday. I cannot believe it. But I started the podcast because a short 18 months prior to Lola coming into this world, I felt like I was lacking a lot of purpose and a lot of drive. So I had my son, Jesse. So I have 2 children, Lola and Jesse, and I also have 2 stepdaughters, Raquel and Alexis. They are school age, so almost 11, and 9 years old. And my life has been mum mode, fully chaotic, really crazy. And when I brought my son into the world, and then again my daughter when I was pregnant with her, I'm like, this whole stay-at-home mum life just isn't for me. I own 2 businesses with my husband, who he took the reins of, because, you know, having babies, it's like, well, they're naturally coming from you. So naturally you're going to be at home with them. And, you know, for the first few months of their life, we'll introduce daycare and things later on, which we had planned to do. But that time at home with them, I was gobsmacked at how bored I was, at how much I didn't want to be with them. I love my kids. I love being at home with them. I love being present with them and watching them grow and learn. Anyone that knows me knows I'm absolutely obsessed with them, but I cannot stand building train tracks. I cannot stand doing I have podcasts in my headphones when I'm at the park, because I'm like, 2 things at once. I can learn and I can play. Like, I am go, go, go. That's how I've always been. And I think that when I started, that's my reason for starting my podcast, is I just needed something more. I wanted to share, I wanted to empower, and I wanted to educate. And I wanted to do that on a bigger scale than what I could do in the capacity of, you know, meeting people in everyday life. So that's why I started the podcast. And in 12 months, I have grown that, and it is almost at over, 10,000 downloads, which I'm really proud to say. I'm 50 episodes deep. I absolutely love my everyday work. But yeah, other than that, I'm with my babies. I'm running around after school sports with my stepdaughters. I am a wife to my husband, Steve. We've been together for 4 years now, and we have created a really beautiful life.
Amazing. Well, I love all of that. And I also love touching on, I guess, just quickly the fact that every mum's motherhood journey is so different. I personally have friends who are exactly like you. Go, 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 go. Had a baby, and it's, you would never think for them to not be like the career driven person, and they're like, actually, I'm taking a break. I've had friends who are the opposite, who, you would who really have that like natural, slow paced person. And then as soon as they have a kid, they're like, I can't wait to balance it all and go back to work and stuff. So it's so interesting and just so validating that we all have different experiences and balance and stuff like that. Like, I'm a working mum myself. Like, I work 3 days a week and have my own business, and then raising a toddler, like chaos. And so
Yeah.
We all have to figure out what our own balance is and what life feels right for us and looks like. And I think that's so validating, because I think sometimes there is this expectation of like, it to be calm and like, I'm going to love the first year of being at home and connecting. And it's like, well, no, it's not that easy. It's not that like easy to just slip into pre-motherhood to post-motherhood. So let's validate the whole spectrum of experiences that is,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good. And again, congratulations on getting to 10,000 listens. That's amazing in such a short amount of time. So well done. I think that's like a good reflection of like the content that you're bringing, right? Like, people listen to things that they can relate to or love, or an energy. It's got like an energetic pull to it. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. It has, when I reflected on it, and I thought, you get stuck in the comparisonitis of what other people are doing and things like that. And it is really hard in this podcast world, because as I said earlier, before we hit record, it is quite a busy market. It's quite flooded. There's a lot of people starting podcasts, but I've got a message and I've got a mission, and I really want to support, empower, and inspire women as much as I can with any possible way that I can. And I am really proud of that number. I think for someone that had a newborn for the majority of that, was navigating 2 kids under 2. I had 2 stepchildren 50% of the time. Like, it has been busy, to say the least. So yeah, I'm really proud of that.
Amazing. Well, you should. And again, like, obviously we always talk about not putting it on a number, but at the same time, it's okay to celebrate when we hit a bloody big milestone. So again, congratulations on that. I think that's like a good accomplishment. And I guess that'll lead us to our next question of just that redefine, because the person that Kris is, who has the ambition to go start a podcast when when you're pregnant, like, all of those sorts of things like that. I'm interested to hear how the Kris that's in front of me now became that person, and one of your experiences that led to that. So the second part of our 4R formula, so we've got reflect and then redefine. What's a hard moment that's changed things for you? So maybe something that's redefined, like a new perspective or meaning in the way that you see life. What was that for you?
I think upon reflection of this question, I didn't consider this my redefining moment until I've recently been asked this question, right? And I suppose I had the ability to go back and reflect on what the steps were after this, and really understand why I am the way I am, who I was before I was this version of myself, and who that person was shaped by. So to take you back a little bit, when I was in year 3, so year 3, I believe I would have been 8 years old, my parents separated. Now, I went to a school, and back then it wasn't 1 in 3 Australian families divorced. That's today's average rate of families that are divorced. Back then, I don't even know what the number was. It would have been like 1 in 10 or something, because I was the only child in my entire year that had a divorced family. And that was up until year 7. So I didn't have anyone to share the experience of having a split household with. I didn't have anyone to share the experience of having a father completely disconnect and remove himself from my life for 12 months after separating from my mum. I didn't have anyone to talk about, the fact my mum was a solo parent. She was a single mum working 3 jobs to provide for us. And that we were suddenly half a family. It really felt like half a family, because everyone else in my life had 2 parents, and birthday parties, Christmases, all of these events in our little 8-year-old lives that were celebrated were moments of me noticing that I didn't have a second parent there. Now, later in life, my dad did come back into my life. When he did separate from us for that, that first 12 months, he had gone to go and find himself and do whatever journey he needed to do for him in that time. As an adult, I kind of go, I wish I was that selfish. I wish I could drop my kids and just go, because if I had that sort of selfishness, it would make life a lot easier. So I respect that that's what he needed to go and find who he needed to be. He was never a bad man. He was never, you hear about all of these traumatic experiences children go through, and I'm so grateful and so blessed that I didn't experience alcoholism, sexual abuse, all these horrific things. But I always knew from when I was 8 years old, and I remember thinking it because I remember the doona cover I had when I looked in the mirror when I thought this thought. I love my dad, but I don't like him. Why does everyone want me to like him? And everything that happened from then on forward through my teenage years, I had this person that I was told that I had to be connected to. He was my father. I have to love him. I have to be with him. I have to go there every second weekend. He only wanted me every second weekend. He didn't want me any more than that or less than that, but that was enough for him. That was his limit. He'd drop us back early. He'd pick us up late, that sort of thing. Didn't come to school sports, didn't come to assemblies, all that sort of jazz. So I really noticed a significant difference between, hey, mum never missed a single thing, even though she worked 3 jobs and didn't sleep, but dad couldn't, get out of work to make it to whatever. And I think that really shaped me in those late childhood years, so 11 and 12, up until early teenagehood, where I then decided from early teens that I would label it. I have daddy issues. I have depression because I have daddy issues. I binge eat because I have daddy issues. I binge drink because I have daddy issues. I felt like I needed to validate myself and my worth for a really, really long time, up until early adulthood as well. And that really had a massive impact on me and who I am and who I am now, because I have built resilience and strength, I suppose, from my deepest, darkest moments, sitting down to a bottle of vodka as a 16-year-old, hiding from my mom, just hoping that I could just go to sleep. I just didn't want to wake up. I had some really frightening moments in my teenage years, because at the end of the day, I just wanted to be loved. And that all stemmed from the disconnection of my relationship with my father. And as an adult, I have learnt and grown, and I think that we'll expand on this a little more in the later points that we have to discuss. But as an adult, I made the decision to change the narrative on what the definition of family is, because I loved the idea of a father. I loved the idea of a man to walk me down the aisle, but my dad didn't walk me down the aisle 2 years ago. He was there, but I didn't let him. I didn't want him to hand me to someone else. He didn't deserve that in my eyes, and that's really hard to say. I couldn't say that to him, but that's really hard to say out loud. I just physically couldn't have him arm in arm with me to walk me down that aisle. And I needed to change that narrative.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that experience. I think that definitely there'll be listeners who can relate to that. It's funny that I actually went to a public school, and a really shitty public school. So I didn't go to a Catholic school, and I was actually one of the only people who had parents together. So I
Wow.
think we went to school around the same time, but it's just interesting how different demographics can have different experiences, and particularly like religious families. Public
Yeah.
school isn't like it's a whole different experience. So,
Yeah.
and that's not to say my parents' relationship was healthy by any means. Just because they were together, I created a fantasy was that was, but we can get to that in another episode. But I guess the other thing I want to validate for you, Kris, and I guess my other listeners listening, and this comes up a lot in my one-on-one coaching that I do with people in therapy a lot, is like, oh, I didn't get sexually abused. I didn't have an alcoholic parent. Like, I don't have trauma, but all this bad stuff happened. And it's like, actually, trauma isn't what's happened to you. It's how it affects you. So if
Mm.
you don't get emotionally validated as a child, that's emotional neglect. That's trauma. And it's hard to hear that the first time, because I think people have this big thing about the big T, trauma. But
Mm.
I can guarantee you and people who've been following me on Instagram will know, I guess I was very hesitant about talking about trauma on my Instagram page because people don't relate to it. They're like, oh, I've got anxiety and depression. I don't have trauma. But the reality is, every single person on this planet will experiencing something shitty that makes them feel alone, that makes them feel not good enough, that makes them feel like their worth is tied to something external, whether it's appearance, achievement, whatever. Those experiences, when we have them as a child, that's trauma, right? Because as adults, we can go, oh, like we can untangle that stuff. We can like be logical, but children just have to make sense of the world on their own. And because of that, they
Mm.
internalize so much. Like you, as a child, you wouldn't have been able to tell, oh, dad's just got to sort his shit out. It would have been, there's something wrong with me. Like, why isn't he here for me? Why isn't he here? Like, children just internalize that. So I think thank you for sharing that, because I think, yeah, there'll be people out there who are saying, like, do I have trauma? Do I not have trauma? Like, we know that coming from a divorced household is an experience of trauma, because you can have two really happy, healthy parents, two really happy, healthy places, but it's still this thing of like, had this got to do with me? If I behaved better, would this have happened? Do they still love me? Like, am I good
Mm.
enough? All that stuff. It's just part of growing up. And we all have to
Mm.
go through shit. So don't ever feel alone in that. I think that's the thing. So thank you for that. So I guess going to the redesign, I guess you spoke about there were a lot of hard moments, I guess, because of the situation with your dad. And as a teenager, I think we've all been there, where it's like you see the friends who binge drinking, or whether it's us ourselves binge drinking, doing all of that. How did you go from like sort of maybe doing unhealthy coping mechanisms to sort of, what tools did you use to I guess, make your life better? Like you're saying, like change the narrative. Like, there's some things that's got to change for us to even seek help or know that there is a narrative that we need to change. So what was that for you? That, like, what things helped you redesign your life sort of out of that?
Yeah, so look, if I think back to between 16 to 18, that time was probably the worst, where I was so up and down. I was on antidepressants and I was overweight. I was unhappy. I was mixing with toxic environments. I had a really awful, and sorry, Mum, I know you'll listen to this episode, and I had a really awful relationship with my mum, and it was all at my own doing. My mum gave me nothing but love and support. And I basically had to sit in my shit to climb out of it. I basically had to hit rock bottom, hit that big black deep hole, and crawl back out of it. Now, I didn't have the self-awareness that I have now and the tools in my mental toolbox that I have now as an adult and a mother and a parent, and all of the work that I've done since then. You know, another decade later, I'm 29 years old now. So now I'm so self-aware that when my father and I recently redisconnected, if that's a word, redisconnected, we almost got back together. When I fell pregnant, I thought, I don't want to take away my dad's right to be a grandparent. I have to reconnect. So I did. I reached out. I reconnected. It was a very short reconnection, couple of years. He was at my wedding, as I mentioned earlier, until my daughter was born, Lola, so my second, and I just couldn't do it. There was too much resentment from me. There was too much trauma from the past from me. I just couldn't stay happy in that relationship. And I'm so self-aware, and I've done so much work that I reflected on this and I went, I don't have to. I love the idea of this man. I don't want this man in my life. This is not what life's about. I shouldn't be waking up feeling worried that I have to speak to him or see him that day. I shouldn't want to avoid him. I shouldn't want to not want to take his call. If I don't want someone in my life, they don't have to be there. You get one life. We have that choice. Just because someone is of bloodline, just because someone procreated with our mother 30 years ago, doesn't mean that we have to have a relationship with that person. And I changed the narrative. Now, as a late teen, I remember trying to disconnect from this relationship, and I grew up in Newcastle, New South Wales. I have been here my entire life, and it hasn't just been me. It is my great grandparents that have all grown up here. So I have a lot of family in this area, and everyone would say the same thing. But he's your dad. But he's your dad. You have to love him. You can't not have him in your life. He's your father. He's their pop. He's their grandfather. And it's almost like that new term, well, not new, I'm sure it's not new, but it's new to me, toxic positivity, where people are saying something that's supposed to make us feel better and supposed to feel nice, but instead it's causing us more pain. Like, I've just told you that being in this man's presence causes me to be triggered by my past traumas, and you're saying, but I have to have him in my life. That's not helping me. You know, you're not giving me what I need right now. And I think as a mother and all these years later, the tools that I have in my mental toolbox being, I've spoken to psychologists, I have a kinesiologist, I journal, I use affirmations daily, I meditate, I listen to all sorts of podcasts. I'm constantly learning and teaching myself new practices. Anything that I can do to develop as a human and evolve and expand, I am doing. Me 10 years ago wasn't doing that. Me 10 years ago didn't have the knowledge I have now, but how I got through it then, to answer the question, would have been leaning on my mum for support, because she was the only person who never spoke a bad word about my father. She only said, he loves you and he's doing the best job he can. And that got me through that period, because I felt like I was grieving a loss almost. Does that make sense? I was grieving. He hadn't died, but I constantly felt like I was grieving him. And even when we disconnected recently, I think it was, Lola's one, so she was a couple of weeks old when I put my hands in the air and I just said, I'm so sorry. I you're trying so hard. I know you want this, but I can't do this again.
Mm-hmm.
that I was able to just really understand how far I've come to redesign that narrative.
Yeah. And I guess again, thank you so much for sharing. I just so appreciate the honesty and all of it, and I think again it's like redefining grief and loss. I think a lot of people associate grief with, again, like you were saying, like somebody passing, but grief is any time you have an expectation about how something's going to be and it doesn't turn out that way. So grief can be when you get a divorce. Nobody plans on ever getting a divorce, but it's like grieving that whole, I thought I was going to have the white picket fence and be married forever, and now I have to have this loss. Grief can be thinking that you're going to have a career in a certain area and then finding out, actually, I can't do that for one reason or another. Or, and grief can be when you love someone so much, but you choose to set a boundary that you just can't have them in your life. And that's a loss, because we all have this idea, like the movies, TV, it all paints out like what a dad's supposed to be. And especially when you've had those experiences of like all your other friends having their mums and dads around and all of that, like it really emphasizes like this, again, this sort of this definition of what a family looks like you say, a dad looks like. And so grief is letting go of these definitions that just aren't helpful to us. Like how was that? If there was a TV show like Neighbours or something at that time that would have had divorced mum and dad, how much could that have changed the narrative for all the other kids having a divorced mum and dad as well? Like that's so powerful nowadays. As a person of color, I love seeing like TV shows that have like actually diversity in it. Like it's like, oh hey, I'm a real person, I'm not just the person at the Quickie Mart. Like people like me have an Australian accent, drink alcohol, like it's like it's, but that's the thing, like it's crushing these stereotypes, because when we have these such rigid ideas of what a family looks like, what a dad looks like, it can be so damaging to when you don't have that. So it's like, as an adult, just undoing all that shit and going through the grief.
Totally. And I think when I became a mother, it really allowed me to firstly unlearn a lot of old practices that have been ingrained to me through my younger years, and that whole inner child thing. I think I learned a lot in my first couple of years of having my son. And what I think my biggest learning is I could not comprehend how my dad, because I have a husband that is so present with his children, and a husband that is the man that takes them and does everything all weekend long without complaining and absolutely adores his kids. And when he walks through the door at night, his kids run up to him and tackle him over, and he plays with them until they go to bed. He'll put them to bed. Like my dad would get home from work, be grouchy as fuck because he worked 12 hours, walk in the door, be cranky. And like, I remember cuddling him, and then my kinesiologist actually brought this memory up. I hadn't thought of it in a really long time, but she brought this up for me. And it was me knowing that hug meant it was time for me to go to bed. As soon as he got home, hug, we go to bed, because it's too chaotic, it's too loud, he wants peace and quiet. And that was just the routine. I don't have that in my home. My husband isn't like that. So for me as a parent, and marrying someone that's the opposite to that, it really brought up a lot for me. And then having this man as my children's grandfather in their life, I'm like, no, you don't get to come in and be fun parent now. You don't get to have that relationship. You didn't want me when I was their age. You didn't do those things. And, it's really hard, because he's not a bad man. And I know he genuinely loves me. I do know that. I'll always know that. And it's really sad that this is how it's had to end. But this was consuming for me, and I had to make a call at some point. And ever since, I've been not consumed by it. So I know I made the right decision for me and my family. And I wish him all the best. I hope he, lives a healthy and happy life. But I just couldn't let go. And that's my own healing and my own shit I need to go, keep working on. But I know that I just need to let it go.
Yeah. And what a journey that must have been. And like, it sounds like your mum is an amazing person. Like you say, like she never said anything bad, and she was the reason that you were sort of able to get out of that dark place. And I'm sure, like, you know, afterwards there would have been some things, but I think that's why it's so important to understand the importance of having just one person. You know, again, when I work with people one-on-one, I always sort of ask, like, who is someone that you can be 100% yourself with? Like, you can actually say, this is pissing me off, or this made me sad today, or, you know, I find that this person's triggering me, or, you know, like, you can have the good stuff, but the bad stuff with too. Like, and I think sometimes, again, like, media makes it out like, oh, we're meant to have 10 girlfriends that we tell all our deepest, darkest secrets to. And it's like, people need to earn that story, as Brené Brown says, right? Like, you
Totally.
don't, you have maybe two, three, one even person in your life, but the power of having one person who you can completely be yourself with and completely see you and hear your story. Like, yes, of course, you can come to therapy, you can work with the therapist, you can see a coach, but just that one loving connection makes such a big difference. So it's amazing that you had that relationship with your mum. Like, it's great that, you know, you had that to sort of get you through those times, you know.
Look, if I'm honest, getting me through those times in the earlier years, we only just got through. I won't lie, it was a really hard time for our relationship. I didn't like her. I didn't want to be around her. I treated her really poorly. And I know that a lot of mums with teenage children might be in this right now listening, going, my child hates me. And, you know, mum made the comment on the phone today because I was saying how I'm very overprotective of my daughter Lola and how she's turning 1 and we co-sleep. And mum's like, get her out of your bed. You don't need to be co-sleeping anymore. Like, she's my child, I'll do what I want. And she goes, yeah, well, she's going to hate you eventually one day anyway, so don't worry about it. And I was like, no, my parenting won't allow my child to hate them. And I was like, and she goes, oh, a bit of judgment there. And I was like, well, you know, we had such a rough time in her parenting and motherhood journey and my being her daughter. I didn't like her, and she stuck with me. And if anyone has teenage daughters that are listening and they're giving you grief right now, do not give up. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. One day they're going to be an adult. One day they're going to get married. One day they're going to, you know, have a daughter of their own, and they will love you and appreciate you, but you've just got to get there. So just don't walk away from them, because the parent that walks away is the parent that lets them down.
Girlfriend, preaching to the choir. I was like such a loose unit as a teenager that yeah, like yeah, my mum, bless her cotton socks, like, just you kind of go, how did you survive that? And what's coming for me? And you sort of think to yourself, like, okay, I'm the cycle breaker. Like, I'm going to do all the healing so that when our kids are teenagers, right, we're going to be like, yep, all good. Right. But I actually think at least we've got the smarts to be like, I can tell if you're going to sneak out. I can tell if there's bottles in your bag. I can tell, like, you know, even like that's a normal part of teenage years, I think, is just the experimenting with stuff. But I think you're so right. It's like sticking it out. It's hard. It's hard. So, but you know, the joys of what we have to look forward to in motherhood, right?
Right.
I'm looking forward to being a grandparent already, because I'm like, how good is it going to be when you're a grandparent? Like, here, kids, have the iPad for as long as you want. Have the chocolates, have the this. Like, me trying to be responsible is like, oh, you know, that's only for the grandparents' house. Like, I don't have the tap out devices, right? Like, when I need to tap out, I don't have that. So I can't wait to be a grandparent and just be like, whatever goes.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree.
And I guess that leads us to, I guess, our final R of the 4R formula, you know, in our 4Q podcast. So then we've got reflect, redefine, redesign, and then realign. And realign is really all about, like, after going through this journey and, you know, what is life like for you now? And I know you touched on it already, but what do you do to keep things like cool and calm and connected? And how do you stop those sort of I guess those negative, those negative experiences, we can heal them, but we still can get triggered sometimes, right? There's still going to be moments on our bad days, if we haven't slept or whatever, that they can kind of creep in a little bit. So how do you stay aligned and sort of stop maybe some of those not so good experiences of life creeping back in?
I think the most important thing for me has been learning and working on creating healthy boundaries for myself, for my family, and really, really just owning those boundaries and honoring them. Because I think whilst we can, we can put pen to paper and say, hey, I'm going to create A, B, C, D as my boundary, you need to honor it. You need to respect it. And if somebody doesn't fit within that boundary, or if something happens and you feel triggered and you feel like, someone in your life is being and sharing that toxic positivity towards you, you need to go, hey, this isn't honoring my boundary by allowing this, because what we allow will continue, right? So you are in control of your own life. Our values are our values. Our relationships are our relationships. We have control. So owning that control, don't allow anyone else to control or dictate our life. If it's affecting us in some way that hurts us, that triggers us, that causes us any anxiety or fret or fears, and taking responsibility for that has been, I suppose, the biggest factor in how I have reshaped who I am, and how I'm living contently and really happily. Taking no shit, basically, taking no shit, honoring myself, doing what I think's best for my family. And if someone doesn't like that, well, good for you. Good for you. Your opinion is not valid to me. I have no value in my mindset for your opinion if I feel like it's not doing good for my family or myself. Because I've cared for a long time, especially with the whole disconnection of my father thing. I cared what other people thought. I cared how it looked to people. I cared of judgment. I cared at my wedding, if my dad wasn't there, then I'll have questions that I have to answer. I don't want to answer the question, so it's easier if he's there. I was so fearful of other people and their expectations of me and their social and cultural conditioning of me having my father and my mother both present at my wedding, that I allow those opinions and expectations to take control of what I truly wanted. And I feel now, and I know that my father won't listen to this podcast, so I'm saying this freely and openly with the hopes that he doesn't, because I hate hurting anyone's feelings. I'm someone that is a people pleaser, and I hate to hurt people. But I feel now, when I decided to reconnect, I was doing it from a place of fear, not from a place of my true desire.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that now. So now when I make decisions, now when I make changes in my lifestyle, or I cut people from my life, I'm doing so with intention and doing so with the understanding that these people, these family members, changing the narrative on what family means, it's because it doesn't align or serve with my life anymore. And I do it from a kind place, a compassionate and empathetic place, not from a place of fear or judgment or nastiness. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%, 100%. Again, I'm always bringing it back to my Instagram, because that's where I just kind of hang out. That's my main kind of social platform. But some of you would have seen, I recently shared one of Oprah's videos, and I think she was talking to Brené Brown in the interview around the fact that it's like, you can love a person and and miss them every single day, but no longer have them in your life. And that's, and there are people out there, whether it's a parent they've had to do that to, a sibling they've had to do that to, some people have had to let go of children who are abusive even. That's hard to let those people go, knowing that you love them, but they just can't be in your life, whether it's just for now, whether it's just forever. whatever that looks like, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's totally okay. So I think that's a really powerful thing to share, and I so appreciate, bringing your all of you. I know how it's so not easy to just show up with all of our thoughts, all of our feelings, and not sort of worry. But I'm pretty sure your dad's not going to listen to some chick in Queensland, some
Look, I
therapist in
don't know.
Queensland. But even if he does, you're speaking your truth. If people, you know, your truth is your truth, right? Your experience is your experience. And even if they say, I didn't mean it that way, well, sorry, that's just how I feel. So yeah.
Yeah. I think, I think my father will always know that I love him. And sadly, our values have never aligned. Sadly, we've never had that connection. And I don't know whether that's because from childhood that we weren't connected and he made choices that impacted that, or whether we just truly weren't meant to be a part of each other's lives. What I do know is that I'm happier without the energy and the toxicity that consumes me when I have that relationship. And I'm sure that he's happier in return as well.
Yeah. Yes. And I think from a psychological perspective, like a spiritual perspective, all of those things, I think the universe is a very mysterious place, and who knows how that experience shaped your life for the better. Even maybe you chose a partner who's so attentive because you're so conscious of that. It maybe if you weren't
100%.
if you weren't conscious of that, maybe you wouldn't have picked someone who's so attentive. That wouldn't be on your radar to pick up someone who's so attentive. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's amazing how sometimes these experiences make us awake to what we want, by experiencing what we don't want. As sucky as it is to go through it, right?
Right. Yeah. Oh, look, it's so sucky. But hey, how can we evolve? How can we grow if we don't learn and rediscover and go through pain to move through the pain, right?
Yeah. So again, Kris, before we finish up, thank you so much. I feel so blessed that you came on and bring your full self and your full energy, and for both of us to do this at night, mum life. I'm wondering, for our audience, where can they find you if they want to listen to your podcast, if they want to find you on socials? Like, where do you hang out? What do you do? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so to listen to my podcast, where I've got 47 amazing episodes, 48 coming next week, Inside Out with Kris on both Apple and Spotify. Or if you don't have either of those, you could go to www.insideoutwithkris.com.au, where all my podcasts are on my website. Oh, sorry, I lost the camera there. Or you could jump over to my Instagram, which has all of those links, which is just at Inside Out with Kris, Kris, and you will find me there.
Awesome. And of course, I'll put all the links in the description below, so you can just click away and find Kris super easy. Thank you again. And I guess I'll speak to you next time.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute honor to be on your podcast, and I so appreciate your time.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Kris. Bye.